if at least a part of you isn't secretly expecting Penn State to lose this game at Minnesota, are you even a real Nittany Lions fan? We'll get through it together. Grab your pencil and your paper. It's the Obligatory PSU Pregame Show. We're this close. We are this close now, boys. I can taste it. I can taste that home playoff game. And I bet you can too. It's the Obligatory PSU Pregame Show. We're, as always, at the We Are in Philipsburg. I, as always, am your fake host, Chris Buchanani. Here in studio with me, I got campus legend Mike the Mailman. I got Kevin Horn. And on the road, but not left out. Sorry you couldn't get your way out of this, Noble. Brandon Noble, former Penn State and NFL defensive tackle.
Yeah, hopefully my dogs don't bark too much while we do this.
Well, that's the kind of quality programming and production value people look for when they come to Obligatory. Guys, this is a big one this week. There are a lot of emotions and a lot of history wrapped up with Minnesota. But before we get there, I want to hit on a couple other topics. I want to start with Tyler Warren and the amazing game he had out at Purdue this past weekend. Kev, let me just ask you right out of the gate. Do you think he has now put himself in the conversation for the best tight end in Penn State history?
Absolutely, and it's by necessity, right? He's had an amazing season. He's an amazing athlete. He's going to be a great NFL player. And I love Tyler Warren. He's the man. Previous greats, your Mike Gesicki's and I don't know, let's go back to Ted Kwolek or whatever. They at least had someone else on the team that could catch a football. Right. So this team is 7-5 without Tyler Warren. Let's just be honest with ourselves. Right. He is the only offensive weapon, and we have a very good quarterback. So he's getting a little bit of a benefit with the counting stats by the fact that no one else can get open. That's not a discredit to him. That's just facts. So yes, I think by the time it's all said and done, and maybe he gets some playoff stats too, he may end up taking that crown. And Coach Franklin in his press conference, I think he was sort of not taunting, but enticing Andrew Olash, who's a Michigan commit, one of the best recruits in the state, a tight end. He basically said, I don't know why, if you're a tight end in Pennsylvania, you would not come to Penn State. Look at our track record. And he's exactly right. Maybe it'll work.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Gesicki, Pat Fryermuth, Brenton Strange, Theo Johnson. All those guys are playing in the league. You brought up Teddy Kwolek. Mike, in the game against the Boilermakers, Tyler Warren he tied 2 career marks for tight ends at Penn State. He tied the great Ted Kwolek from the 1968 undefeated team for most career 100-yard receiving games. And he tied Pat Fryermuth for most receiving touchdowns for a Penn State tight end.
In 68, when I saw Kwolek play, I thought he was the best tight end I've ever seen. And now this guy's really proved to be as good and even better.
Yeah, folks, if you don't know the name, look him up. He's a college football Hall of Famer, was part of some great Penn State football teams. And you said that those teams had someone else who could catch a pass. If you want to see something amusing and understand how much college football has changed in the last 50 years plus, go Google Chuck Burkhart's passing stats during Penn State's run of undefeated seasons in 68 and 69.
He didn't lose a game for 2 seasons, and his completion rate was like 40%, and he was a consensus All-American. I wish I was around. That sounds like amazing football.
Awesome. Noble, you played with one of the all-time greats at tight end at Penn State, Kyle Brady. Where do you think Tyler Warren stacks up? And I'm going to also throw this to you. Do you think he belongs, it's not at the Downtown Athletic Club anymore, but invited to the Heisman Trophy ceremony in New York in December?
I'll go there first. Right now, yeah, I do. I think he does. And here's why. Because he's the best football player on the Penn State football team in general, right? He like Kevin said, like he makes the offense go. So I do believe that, and that's what technically the Heisman Trophy is about, right? It's being the best football player. And this guy does it all from a football perspective, right? He blocks, he runs, he throws, he catches. And I don't disagree with Kevin at all about, the impact that he's had on our record, right? He has gotten Penn State where they are. I played with Kyle Brady. Again, you talk about a different set of circumstances, right? We had weapons all over the place. Like Bobby Ingram and Freddie Scott and Joe Jurevicius and Kijana Carter, right? You know what I mean? Like, so the ball had to go around. So from a numbers perspective, Kyle probably doesn't even come close to what these guys are doing. But again, when I look at Kyle, like that to me is the definition of a tight end. But I do think that in today's football, Tyler Warren is the definition of what you want a tight end to be, a guy that can do everything for you, create matchup problems, can take a snap, which is absurd. I think they definitely caught lightning in a bottle with this guy. There's not going to be another one because of his skill set, right? Because he played quarterback, in high school. So he's very, very unique. And I've really enjoyed watching him play. The only thing that scares me is we are so dependent on him offensively, is that it isn't easy. It's surprising to me that defensive coordinators haven't done more to take him away. And maybe they have, and he's just that good. Again, I don't break the film down, the Penn State games like I do if I was coaching. But like, if they take him away, what happens?
Yeah, I mean, they've tried, right? And Ohio State did. That's why Penn State lost. They put Caleb Downs on him, who's one of the best defenders in the country, and another person. He was doubled the whole game. They're trying. They're doubling him up. They can't do it. I mean, these teams are incapable of doing it, which is why he's so great. And yes, it is frustrating. I mean, we're in week 10. Yes, we're over relying on him. I do appreciate that they just like, all right, this is all we got. We're going to throw it to him when we need it. We're going to do some crazy stuff with him. He was our leading rusher and leading receiver against Purdue. That's just the reality of the situation on our offense. It'd be like if the 94 team, like Kyle Brady was your leading receiver, leading rusher, and you had no other weapons. Like imagine going through that whole year with that. Exactly. And they're still probably going to win. Well, they already won double-digit games. They're still probably going to, well, not yet. They're still going to win double-digit games in probably 11 games. Yeah. So, it's
I don't believe in jinxes. Don't jinx it.
Look, if I could jinx anything, it would have happened long ago. But
that's true.
Just a very strange season, and I'm happy for him. He's going to make a lot of money, and we owe him. No matter how far this team goes this year, we pretty much owe it all to him and to a nearly the same extent, Drew Aller. That's it.
And we got the perfect offensive coordinator to use a guy like that, mad scientist type and Andy Kotelnicki. So it's a great marriage of coaching and player talent. But just think about it. We just had a conversation about, is this guy the greatest tight end in the history of this football program? And we've had some really good ones, and we've won a ton of games and done a lot of amazing stuff as a football program at Penn State. And right now we have the chance to watch a guy who might be the best to ever do it. Don't take it for granted. We don't know how many more of these games we've got left. So enjoy the opportunity while you have it. Any other takeaways from the Purdue game, guys? I've got a couple thoughts, but Mike, I'm curious about your reaction overall.
Well, like we said in the show last week, we said how they just got to take care of business, do what they do, and let it go. And that's what they did. They scored early, they held up defensively, and I thought they just played a real calm, relaxed game. I don't know about you. Do you think it was relaxed out there?
Yeah, I mean, I was never perturbed. I mean, Drew Aller was so efficient. He had two incomplete passes the whole game. One was a throwaway, and one was just a bad pass to Katron Allen. Just like his progress and the fact. I mean, there were some news stories dropping this week that like we could actually have Drew Aller for another year. We'll talk about that, I think, probably in the last episode. But like, he is seriously, those articles don't drop. They're not from people that just speculate. He's thinking about coming back, and it maybe even be the likely scenario. So that would be awesome. Other than that, no, not really. I mean, the second string played like second string. It doesn't really
not up to the standard, as
right.
Coach Franklin said.
Doesn't make me feel very good about next year. We saw the debut of some of the. We know why, despite the fact that they've been terrible, Harrison Wallace and Amari Evans are the starting wide receivers, because we saw Tyseer Denmark and who was the
Anthony
other?
Ivy
and Anthony Ivy take the field, and it was not a pretty sight. I think Mike and Lou Prado could line up on both sides like that and do just the same.
Give them time. They're gonna be all right. Give them time.
I'm actually with Mailman on this one. I'm not going to judge them on the opening game jitters and they haven't played all season. Brandon, one of the things I noticed in this game against Purdue, and I've been picking up on the last few weeks, I wanted to get your take on it. It seems to me like Abdul Carter has really settled in at defensive end now, and it just looks to me like that dude is getting held practically every play. And I don't know, the officials may just look at it and say, well, we can't flag them 10 yards on every single snap. So we're just not going to do it at all until it gets over the top blatant, which you did see with back-to-back holding penalties. And then maybe they had to restrain it a little bit. But that guy just looks unblockable to me at this point.
He is, and he's definitely. Look, it's a different position. It's not that easy. I always kind of laugh in staff meetings and stuff like that when we'll just move this guy up to defensive line, right? We'll put him up on the line of scrimmage. It's not any easier up there. In fact, sometimes it's harder from a physical standpoint. But I think what you're seeing is a guy that, look, man, he's a defensive end. Like he is definitely. He has the ability to be a weapon. You can move him around and do things with him. But he is most effective and disruptive when he's on the line of scrimmage. They're not going to call holding. I mean, they can't. I think to your point, Chris, they would have to call it every play. And I do think that there are times when it gets egregious and you go, man, like, why aren't they calling it? And I don't know. I mean, look, I've when I was playing football, I had an NFL official look at me and just say, hey, we're not calling it today. You know what I mean? Like, that's just how it's going to work. And it's one of those rules that doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? Because it's not really enforced. And so maybe at some point, football in general takes a look at it again. But to be as disruptive as he is, when, again, kind of to the same point about Tyler Warren, offensively, people are game planning for him, right? You're seeing chips, you're seeing double teams, you're seeing that he's accounted for on the line of scrimmage, and he's still being as disruptive as he has been over the last few weeks. And it's good to see that he's kind of gotten into it, when you want him to. Football, right, you want to peak now in college football, right? The next few weeks, you want to get better and better and better. So that first home playoff game that we get to go play another game, right? The team has to get better. And defensively, having him be this disruptive has helped tremendously, especially when I don't know that the linebacking core has been – they're good, right? But, like, they're not great. It's not one of those kind of defenses. I think we're good on the back end. I think our front has been okay, depending on how Carter has played. But I think that he has been a disruptive force that unfortunately, as fans, we have to sit there and go, he's getting held, but they're not going to call it.
He's been great, and I laughed when he celebrated after they finally called the first one at the game. I thought that was well deserved. It is interesting. I mean, I only pay attention to the offensive line when watching Penn State games, and when I'm rewatching the Penn State games more accurately. It seems like the holding call has been it's developed over the last couple of years, right? It used to get called just sort of randomly, right? And you look at it and be like, I don't know, that's no worse than any other play. Now they're pretty much only calling it. They're calling a lot of defensive holdings these days, and they're only calling holding on the offensive line when they literally tackle the man, right? And because Abdul Carter is such a great athlete, he never gets off his feet. He's just not getting the call, right? If when they're grabbing him with both hands from the shoulder off to the side, if he just fell down, they'd probably get called every play. But because he's such a great athlete, he's staying upright and they're not calling it. I don't know. That's just my theory.
That's fair.
I think you're right, Noble, too. Despite all of that, he's still impacting practically every play. So even with the fact that he's damn near getting suplexed on every snap of the ball, he's pressuring the quarterback and changing every play practically. So I think we're going to put a pin in it there. There's some other things I want to talk about on the other side of Trends to Treasure about, some of the controversy about Penn State's ranking in the playoff committee rankings, and also just Minnesota and why we're so on edge. So we'll do that on the other side of Trends to Treasure after this.
Hi, everybody. Mike the Mailman with another session of Trends to Treasure. This week we have 4 games up for you, 2 college and 2 professional games. First up, we have California versus Stanford. California is 5-0 in the last 5 games, so the play here is the California Bears. Next up, we have Arkansas State versus UL Monroe. Arkansas State is a whopping 10-0 in the last 10 games, so the play here is Arkansas State. 10-0 in the last 10 games. That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah, just like the Packers, huh, Mike?
Yeah, that's right. Okay, next up, we go to the NFL. We have Denver at Las Vegas. Denver is 0-6 in the last 6 games, so the players are the Las Vegas Raiders. Last up this week, we have the Miami Dolphins versus New England Patriots. Miami is 7-0 in the last 7 games, so the players are the Miami Dolphins. And that's it for this week's Trends and Treasure. Remember, folks, go with your head and not with your heart. Go get them.
This segment of Obligatory is brought to you by Concierge Medical Associates. Whether you're a weekend warrior or elite level athlete, let Dr. Stephen Murphy and his board certified sports medicine specialists keep you at the top of your game. Schedule an in-person or remote consultation at conciergemedical.ai. Back here on the obligatory PSU pregame show from the We Are In. Good job, as always.
Thank you,
Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe the 10-0 will hit this week.
Yeah,
you think?
Yeah, I hope so. Yep.
Okay. So there has been a lot of chatter in the college football world about Penn State and Indiana in particular. I mean, I feel like people are shooting at Indiana mostly, and we're just catching strays, saying that we don't deserve to be ranked where we are. It's all going to come out in the wash, but I'm happy to be on the winning side of one of these arguments for once, at least for now.
Yeah, the committee likes Penn State for whatever reason. Look, I think I sort of have a heterodox position on the rankings. No surprise there. I mean, I think if you're undefeated, you should be ranked higher than teams with one loss, and one loss should be ranked higher than teams with two losses, unless it is so clear that the one loss is better than the zero loss and the two loss is better than the one loss. It has to be clear and convincing that they are. Not just, I think this SEC team is better than Indiana. And Penn State, for whatever, I mean, look, the criticism is correct. Penn State has played not to no fault of its own because the middle of the Big Ten doesn't exist anymore. I guess Illinois is sort of that prototype now. That's Illinois. Penn State's going to finish the season with Illinois as its best win and no one else even close to like a competent team, right? That's no, like every team on Penn State's schedule other than Illinois is fighting, and Ohio State obviously is fighting for bowl eligibility.
Yeah, here's the problem. Now. I was about to argue, and then I was like, if you were arguing the baseline competence of an opponent,
sorry, Chris, I forgot about Washington. Yeah. They're going to go 7-5. Congratulations.
Right.
So their best win, and it's a good win. It's a good win. It's going to be Illinois.
Yeah.
And they have nothing else, and they lost the one game on their schedule of a really good team. And that can't change that because they only played one really good team all year. They can't help that West Virginia stinks and that the rest of Washington stinks. USC stinks. It's not their fault. It's not their fault. Right. So for whatever reason, the committee loves Penn State and they're getting the benefit of the doubt. I think a 7-point loss to Ohio State went a long way with that because they really like Ohio State too.
Yeah.
But I mean, Indiana should be ranked ahead of Penn State, right? They haven't lost. We've played a similar cupcake schedule. And if Indiana gets blown out by Ohio State, then you can switch it again. That's where I'm at on it. Texas is the same way. Texas's best win is Vanderbilt, right? And they have a tough schedule coming up. They're going to play an A&M and whatever. Texas is number 2 or 3. I don't know. I think it might be different in the AP and the CFP, 2 or 3. They haven't beaten anyone. They've lost to one good team they played. So
what a great, entertaining college football season, by the way, when Vanderbilt's a better win for Texas than Michigan. That's wild.
Right. I was skeptical of this 12-team playoff. I still am. I still think it's too many. But right now is where it gets fun, right? Like, I don't think that Ole Miss should lose 2 games and Alabama should lose 2 games and still have a chance to compete for a national championship. I just don't. Fundamentally, I don't. I think the right number is lower. I'll lose that battle. It's going to go to 16 and then 24, and God knows where it's going to go. But I have to admit that, like, this part of the season is now a whole lot of fun. There's more games that matter on Saturdays to figure out who fits in the top 12, and this whole SEC chaos with 2 losses. How many teams are going to have 2 losses? Like if A&M beats Texas, that's like 6 teams with 2 losses. How do you sort that all out? Because they've all sort of round robin each other. Like, Ole Miss beats whoever, and Tennessee beat Bama, but Tennessee's behind Bama. Like it's a crazy situation, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's more fun because Penn State sits there at number 4, and we don't really have to worry. I do think a 2-loss Penn State, God forbid, we'll talk about that in the next segment, does not get in this year, given the collection of SEC.
Any way that happens.
And I think if Indiana keeps it close with Ohio State, they'll stay in the mix. But if they lose badly, they're going to.
Well, that's going to be the controversy. Like, let's assume they lose. Let's assume they lose by 10.
Yeah.
They should still be in above 2-loss SECs, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. Let's say they lose by 20. I think they should still be in over 2-loss SECs, but I don't think they will be.
No,
I think the score is going to matter a lot.
And you think 10 already is too many points? The line's about 14, I think.
Yeah, it's 12 to 14. I mean, I don't know. Indiana should be in with 1 loss. I don't care. Look, win your games. Win your games. Is it clear? And they're beating the crap out of everyone, right?
Yeah.
Is it clear to me that an Ole Miss or a Tennessee or Georgia is clearly better than Indiana? It's not. Are they probably better than Indiana? Yes.
Yeah, but not,
Is it most likely? But is it clear and convincing to me that they are? No. So put Indiana in. They won every game but one. I'm theorizing. Hopefully they win. That'd be fun.
Yeah, Brendan, Kevin just kind of opened the topic I wanted to ask you, which is, look, we know there are a ton of talented teams in the SEC. I don't even think it's controversial to say it's the best conference. If you want to just look at the number of NFL draft picks that come out of every conference, the SEC is in the lead by a mile every single year.
Apparently it is, because I said that Georgia is probably better than Penn State, and I got the most replies to a tweet I ever got. Anyway.
But to that point, we know that there is something of a grind in that conference. I think it has been over-exaggerated. I think a lot of the SEC partisans are insufferable in the way they make that case, so they actually hurt their standing just by being so obnoxious. But it's fair to say Indiana has played a soft schedule, and a team like Bama or Tennessee or Georgia is facing tougher competition week in and week out. 2 questions for you. If Indiana loses this game to Ohio State this weekend, should they be out? And then should the score factor into that at all?
I think if they lose this one, I don't think they deserve to be out, but I think it depends on exactly what Kevin said too, what the score is and how bad it is, and then what happens with the rest of the season. But I do think they should, if they lose, I think they drop down to the bottom of the fringe area, depending on how bad it is. And I've heard some conversations kind of to what you said, Chris, about within the spread, right? You know what I mean? If they don't get blown out, right? If it's within 14, they stay in the mix. And it's challenging. I mean, look, one of the cool things about this whole thing is it's a little bit more like the NFL now, right? It's a get in the playoffs and go kind of deal. The bad thing is it's not set up like the NFL. So there are still people involved in deciding who gets to go, right? And that's because of the way that college football is built. And so as we kind of morph into this playoff, this kind of FCS level or NFL kind of style of picking the top 12 teams, it's still based on what people think. This mysterious group of people that sit around a boardroom table, right, smoking cigars with dark light and stuff like that, talking about it. So I don't know. Look, I think that if you're undefeated, you should be in, right? You know what I mean? I do believe that. Win all your games. You've done exactly what you're supposed to do. I think that when you start losing games, then you have to talk about strength of schedule and those kinds of things. I think they hold up, and who you lost to should matter, and then how much you lost by should matter. But I mean, look, it's been interesting to watch how everybody loved Indiana until this week, right? Or like the last week, like the media, people have been fawning all over Cignetti and how great it is, right? But then all of a sudden, this narrative out of the SEC loving ESPN folks, especially, right, has been, well, they're not very good, right? They're not playing anybody, and this SEC team is better. And look, Georgia is better. I mean, look, that's just from top to bottom. Like, if you put Georgia on the field against Indiana or Penn State, Georgia's going to be favored. They're a damn good football team, right? Just because of who they are and who they have.
But Brandon, Carson Beck, I heard it all. I
know you did. I know it was entertaining. But I think that right now, Indiana and Penn State, for that matter, are in control of their own destiny, right? Penn State needs to win out. I agree. I think it gets scary if we lose another game, especially considering who's left on the schedule. Indiana has a little wiggle room, and I think most people anticipate them losing to Ohio State. This is 100% going to be a style points kind of loss, which is a weird thing to say. Don't lose by too many if you lose. But look, if they win, man, like then that actually creates some issues to me for maybe Penn State, right? If Indiana beats Ohio State somehow or another, now all of a sudden you've got a one loss. You know what I mean? Like the trickle down effect will be really interesting.
We find ourselves in the uncomfortable, unfamiliar, unenviable position of rooting for the Buckeyes this weekend.
Yeah, I'm not though. I mean, I'm rooting for ultimate chaos. I'm rooting for Ohio State, and I'm rooting for Army over Notre Dame. Oh, yeah. Right? If I get either one of those things,
Amen.
That would be phenomenal.
Sweet. Amen.
I just like the bigger issue this year with these. This happened at the same time of these 18, 20 team conferences. There's no way that I can think of to fix the schedule disparity. Right? It's not Penn State's fault. Its schedule sucks. It's scheduled West Virginia, and they were supposed to win in contention to win the conference. Actually, they still are. They have a backdoor way to get there. They're not gonna. They stink. Who could have thought that Indiana was going to be better than Washington, USC, et cetera, et cetera? Penn State's going to go through this season not having to play Oregon or Indiana. And I mean, that's not their fault. It's not their fault. But they're going to get the benefit. There's so much of that in the SEC and the Big Ten because there's so many good teams at the top and so many crappy teams at the bottom. Yep. And the randomness of the schedule just can really impact like how your whole season goes and getting into the playoffs now that you don't play the majority of your conference every year. It's a really weird situation to be in. I don't have a good solution to fix it. And it's only going to get worse as more teams get added.
And I will note that one of your pet issues is non-conference scheduling. And if there's a reason Penn State has a leg up on Indiana, other than brand, which I think is the number one reason we're ahead of them, Penn State, whatever you say about West Virginia this year, did schedule a Power 4 team. They went on the road and won there to open the season. Indiana bought out a game with Louisville, I think it was, and swapped them out for like Western Illinois or some school I didn't even know existed until they played them. And I do think that matters.
Yeah, it does. It does. And Penn State doesn't play anyone next year.
Yeah, now we're playing Villanova and Nevada.
We get Syracuse a couple years.
But if you win all the games that you're on your schedule, it's like Brandon always said, it's hard to win every game, and they've done that. Penn State has done.
They actually haven't, Mike.
I know. So I know. Well, I'm saying they've won all their games.
Nope.
Indiana.
Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Penn State would never win all their games.
Never. Well,
it's hard to do.
On that note, we have got in front of us the Nittany Lions, 2 more games, and they can do something James Franklin has never done in his decade-long tenure in Happy Valley. So we're going to talk about these Golden Gophers and predict it on the other side of the break. We'll be right back. Random Number Generator is brought to you by the good folks at Anti-Fragile Brewing Company. Anti-Fragile is the official beer supplier fueling the obligatory pregame show. Anti-Fragile brews incredible beer we all enjoy and recommend. And check out their Moody Culture Kombucha and fill up on Uncle John's cheesesteaks. Check them out when you're in Happy Valley at 324 East Calder Way or anytime at antifragilebrew.com. Okay, I managed to fill up 2 segments before I got to the part that is really making me nervous, which is Minnesota. Yeah. So thanks to the folks at Anti-Fragile Brewing Company for being our beer supplier all season long, but especially this week. I need this big time. We've got Millman, Horn, and Noble with me here. All right, guys, look, number one, I think the main reason people get a little edgy whenever you see Minnesota come up on the schedule is that Penn State really has not played them all that much when you consider how long we've been in the Big Ten. The overall series is only 10-6 in favor of the Nittany Lions. And there have been some really good and some really bad games for Penn State in the history of this series. First conference win ever was against Minnesota. So that's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
Tattooed them in 93 and in 1994. Of course, longtime fans know that we were undefeated in 1999 until an unranked Minnesota came to Happy Valley and beat us on homecoming. That stunk. I think newer fans will remember us going out there, again undefeated, again on the cusp of making the playoffs, whether or not we would beat Ohio State 2 weeks later, which, spoiler alert, we didn't. And we lose that one. Yeah. Those are brutal. Those are heartbreaking losses that stay with you.
Oh, I'll never be the same after 2019 Minnesota.
Yeah.
Never. No.
And the reason I bring up the number of times we played them is you just don't see them that often. Yeah. And, you know, when you've only played 16 times over 32 years, and there are 2 just absolutely brutal, traumatizing, program-wrecking losses, you feel a little something when you see that Minnesota uniform.
Yeah, no, I am traumatized, Chris. If you want the Pollyannish bullshit, go watch go watch On 3 or something, right? Like, I see Minnesota. I don't care if we're the better team. I'm terrified. Like, just look, I don't know how. I love James Franklin. I'm glad he's our coach. I don't know how you can do it. Like, just look at the history, right? 2014, 2015, fine. Disregard those years. Sanctions just starting. Cool. 2016, disregard that. It was an amazing year, historic. Fine. Whatever. 2017. You lose to Ohio. You blow it against Ohio State by 1 point when you should have won, and then you go lose to a Michigan State, which is like a Minnesota prototype, right? Same thing with 2018. You lose to Michigan State when you're the better team. 2019, the Minnesota game, which who knows how the rest of the year would have went, but like the 14 playoff, you can go 11-1 and get in. And every single time there was a chance when Penn State was favored and had a 11-1 playoff spot basically in the bag, and you had a lesser opponent like a Michigan State or Minnesota, this program blew it. Every time. That's why I'm so jaded. That's why I'm an awful person. Because of those 3 games, two Michigan States and a Minnesota, and I'll never, ever get over those until he finally does it. And 2020 and 2021 were a disaster. In the last couple of years, you lose to both Ohio State and Michigan, so whatever. So finally, so for the first time since 2019, there's an opportunity with a lesser team on your schedule, because Penn State's beating Maryland. If I'm quitting the show if we lose to Maryland. But
we should disband the football program.
Correct. That should finally be what does it. Finally, for the first time since 2019, there's a chance you win and you're in against a lesser opponent. I don't care about NIL. We have more NIL than Minnesota. I don't care about facilities. Our facilities are better than Minnesota. Again, go listen on 3 if you want to hedge that position. You gotta beat them, and we've never done it. I don't care what people say. We're 12-point favorites. Penn State has never done it in a game like this in the Franklin era. Never. And finally we have a chance to do it.
I'm sure he's making the players aware of this. Don't you think, Franklin?
No, we want to know every opponent's the same.
Here's the thing. Yeah, you can't talk about that. By the way, did somebody from On 3, did they hurt you this week?
I'm sorry.
Picking on the
yes,
poor On 3 guys.
I like T. Frank's my guy. Sorry, T. Frank. I don't. And Greg Pickle. You guys are great. Sorry.
So the one thing that I think is great, and Noble, you'll attest to this. You guys, you come in, the history of the program and who we lost to last year, let alone 25 years ago, does not enter your thinking one iota.
Yep. Nope. Don't think about it at all. You don't even think about last week. Do you know what I mean? Like that, the mindset. I mean, what's amazing is the cliche of 1-0, right? The mantra. It's how most football programs operate, anyways. You know what I mean? This is the game we're going to play, and so yeah, these guys, they don't care. They shouldn't care anyways, and they need to. Now, what happens though sometimes is as a game goes on, right? What can happen is, here we go again kind of deal, right? I think that's a little bit of the Ohio State thing we got going on right now. There's a team that can definitely get in your head where you just seem to lose to them, right? Or vice versa, right? You just beat them, right? Whatever it is, that is more of a thing. Like on game day, as the game is going on, you get that feeling. But going into the game, no, it doesn't. Those guys have no concept of what's going on, and I think that's a good thing, right? You don't. That's for us to talk about, us to think about, and to be affected by. But those guys, they have to be dialed in right now this week and preparing. And so yeah, you really don't think about it too much at all.
Unless you're a 6-year senior, and you're on this team, you've never met Antonio Shelton, who spit in the Minnesota defenders or offensive guy's face in 2019, resulting in a crippling 15-yard penalty. You've never met him.
I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me of that.
At least I really hope you haven't met him. He's not worth meeting. But so yeah, I agree with that. But I'll still never go into Minnesota without just seeing that field storm and that just horrendous effort. I know exactly which end zone it was. I'll never get over it. But winning this weekend would go a long way.
Okay, but and to Noble's point, the Ohio State thing, I do think at this point is somewhat psychological. But that's because you see them every year, and that's built up. I mean, that's a national news story. Penn State can't get past Ohio State. Only old heads but Kevin and me, not you, Mike.
No.
Only we remember 1999 Minnesota, 2019 Minnesota. I talked about, that was our first Big Ten win. I also remember that the 2005 Big Ten champions and the 2016 Big Ten champions kickstarted their seasons with big wins over Minnesota. So sometimes they've been the catalyst to a historic run for Penn State, and sometimes they've been the villain. And I said before the break that if we win the next 2 games, we're going to do something James has not done since he's gotten here. And that's finish a regular season with 1 or fewer losses. This is one of my pet peeves, that we always focus on the number of 11 win campaigns. Mm-hmm. Well, the number of regular season games has continually increased. Like back in the day, back in Teddy Kwolek's day, you won 11 games, you were undefeated the whole year. Yep. And now, you can lose one game or lose 2 regular season games and win your bowl and still have an 11-win season. So I'm not taking anything away from that. But to get to that mark in the regular season, to lose 1 or fewer games, that's tangible progress. It's something that hasn't been done before. And this year, it gets us a playoff game at Beaver Stadium. And the path forward is very clear because these are inferior teams. That 2019 Minnesota team, they weren't great, but they were the best Minnesota team in a quarter century. Mm-hmm. This team is all right. I mean, they have a winning record. They're not anywhere close to that team. They had like Antoine Winfield Jr. and Rashad Bateman and Tanner Morgan. This is a very beatable team for Penn State.
It is. It's the best defense Penn State's played in a while.
Yes,
I mean their linebackers are pretty good. They're good. They're particularly good against the pass, which I think is fortunate for us because we don't get to have any wide receivers that get open. So really, how good you are against the pass is immaterial unless it's Tyler Warren. So that'll be fine. I mean they just lost to Rutgers, right? You can't lose to a team that just lost to Rutgers. And I don't want to. I'm not going to say anything negative again. I appreciate the fact that we are in a position that we're complaining about, oh, we just need to beat Minnesota and we go to the playoffs and win 11 games. Like that's like a very unique position to be in. And I appreciate that we're there because I know a lot of programs would be dying to say, oh, you just have to beat Minnesota on the road as 12-point favorites and you're going to be a 6 seed in the playoffs. Like I don't take that. James thinks we do. I don't take that for granted at all. I've still been hurt too many times, Mike, especially in the late 2010s to ever think about these kind of games the same way again.
You want to randomly generate numbers?
Do I have to?
We both have to.
Okay, fine.
It'll be cathartic. It'll be good.
Like I said, their defense is good. Their quarterback's Max Brosmer, who's sort of like a dink and dunk quarterback. He's not bad. But they don't throw down the field at all. And they have a decent running game. Darius Taylor's are averaging more than 5 yards a carry. So they can do some things. I really don't think our defense has some problems, certainly, but it's been excellent. And I think we match up well against Minnesota as far as our defense and their offense. What happens with our offense is just an adventure every week, right? Can Tyler Warren somehow get 200 yards all purpose or not? If he can't, we're in trouble. I mean, he would against Purdue, it was a terrible team. Our leading rusher was Tyler Warren. Our second leading rusher was Bo Prabula. And then I think it was Nick Singleton, our premier running back, who was trying to go to the NFL at third. Like, you got to be able to run the ball against Minnesota. We couldn't run the ball in 2019. That was a big problem to milk that game away. Look, I'm not going to pick us to lose because I'm going to get too much shit in the comments, but I'm thinking it. I'm thinking it, just so you're aware. I'm saying 28-17, but I'm lying. But 28-17 Penn State officially, but you know what I'm thinking. And you know what you're thinking too, if you think deep down in your heart.
What we're all thinking. I mean, I hate talking about this. Like I'm getting clammy just listening to you talk about this game. I seriously thought, is this going to be a James Franklin special? Should I actually just pick Minnesota? Is that what I think is going to happen? And you know what? It's not. I don't think the James Franklin special, so to speak, is a thing anymore. I think somewhat that was a product of depth and rebuilding depth. I think some of it was, probably mistakes that were made that he has since learned from. But we are now almost 3 full seasons into Penn State winning when they're favored to win, which is something like back before the 2022 season. I said, I'm not going to believe it till I see it, just like I said with Ohio State. But now I've seen it, so I got to believe it. That said, I think you've gone through our acceptable YouTube allotment of S words. So I'm going to say I am pooping bricks and will be, frankly, until we go to all zeros against Maryland for sure, but mostly Minnesota. The only concern I have is, PJ Fleck, they can play a grinded out physical style of football if they can. And last week against Purdue, you did see inexplicably this defense always has like 1 or 2 drives where they just decide to stop tackling. They just get bullied off the ball. And so if that moment coincides with an efficient drive from Minnesota and it's early in the game and they can give that team and that crowd belief by getting on the board with a touchdown, like that poor kid from Purdue who didn't know where his end zone ended. That's the only way where I could start to see doubt creeping in. But I just think Penn State's too talented. The offense is too efficient. And I am too superstitious. I don't even know how to pick it. I'm just going to take the Nittany Lions to win like by a super close score. Again, this is just all superstition. We'll say Penn State 27-24. Mike the Mailman, positivity. Go.
I don't know what you guys are worried about. I mean, you talk about.
We just explained it for 10 minutes.
I know, but I don't get that. I think that's all garbage. I think Penn State.
You're garbage, Mike the Mailman.
Okay.
Get the hell out of here.
I think Penn State is much more talented. I think their presence
Yes.
on the field, they're much more present anymore than they
Yes.
have been. They haven't. But I don't think that there's going to be a problem. I think Penn State will win by 19. Not a problem.
A cover, a solid cover.
Solid.
No, well, this segment is running long. I don't even know what more we can say. I'm getting nervous. My beer is empty. Take us out.
Yeah, so I'll be flying to Seattle on Saturday, hopefully watching it live if the airline I'm on has live TV. And I think it's a win. I feel okay about it. I know this has been a little long. Corey Heatherman, their DC, I've met with him a couple times when he was at JMU, got to know him a little bit. He's really good. My concern is he kind of has some sort of plan like Ohio State did to try and take Warren away, right? And something else has to happen. Again, and whether they can or not, I don't know. I do think that offensively they would probably try and do the same thing too that Ohio State did, run the football if they can, dink and dunk it down the field. They don't have the deep threat that Ohio State does. But I do think that Penn State probably has to weather the storm early. PJ Fleck and his damn rowing the boats. I absolutely can't stand him. So I hope that we boat race him completely. I would love to see a 54-3 kind of deal. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's that. But I do think it's a Penn State win. I'm going to go 35-21.
All right, folks. Grab your nuts. We are this close, okay? I hope to see you this time next week talking about Penn State, one win away from a playoff game in Happy Valley. Until we talk to you next, do take care of yourselves, medicate if necessary, and each other. We are.